Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's kick off our video with a story about parking lot justice and standing up for your rights. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. How I complied my way out of a parking ticket. A few years ago, I parked in a paid parking lot but forgot to buy a parking ticket. When I came back a few minutes later, I discovered an $80 ticket on my dash. While I was frustrated about my own forgetfulness, the ticket itself was fair. However, I came to discover that the amount they had charged me was not. Before leaving the lot, I noticed a small detail on the terms and conditions sign at the entrance of the lot. It said that a failure to pay for a parking ticket would result in a $70 ticket, not the $80 I was charged. While I'm no lawyer, I do know that those signs essentially create an implicit contract upon entering the lot. Therefore, the company was technically violating their own contract by charging me extra. I appealed the ticket, stating that I would be happy to pay the agreed-upon $70, but it was rejected. I then reached out directly to customer service, explaining the same situation. They rejected my request to pay the valid $70 because their ticket amounts are non-negotiable. Cue the malicious compliance. I realized that by their own words, they're the ones attempting to negotiate the price by charging me an extra $10, so I called up the supervisor of their claims department. She was already aware of this dispute and immediately attempted to shut me down, saying the signage is not up for discussion. I reminded her that their company's policy states that ticket amounts are non-negotiable and that given what the terms on the sign stated, they were trying to negotiate a higher price. Once again, she shut me down, stating the signage is not up to discussion. The rest of the conversation went something like this. Me. So where can I escalate this from here? Her. There's no more escalation. Next stage is court. Me. Seems silly to go to court over $10, don't you think? Her. Yeah, it does. Me. Okay, well, I'll begin the small claims court process over the non-negotiable price issue then. Her. Okay. I was having fun at this point and was fully ready to start taking legal steps over this $10 on a matter of principle, and knowing that if I did, the company would immediately cave. Before doing that, however, I sent one final email to the vice president of the company. I explained the whole dispute, explaining the signage, their non-negotiable policy, and how the appeal supervisor told me my next step was to take it to court. I offered them the opportunity to resolve this civilly before going on to that stage. Not even 3 hours later, I got an email back stating that my ticket had been fully cleared as a courtesy. I called their bluff, maliciously complying to the contract and the take it to court attitude, and it worked. As an added bit of pettiness, I replied thanking them and CC'd the appeal supervisor. I then directly addressed her, telling her that this is how easy it could have been resolved if she would have actually addressed the signage issue. The moral of this story: push back against parking lot companies. They use shady practices and try to scare people into paying unjustly. Often a simple but credible legal threat will make any issue disappear. Gotta love it when the VP is involved, as they knew the amount they would lose just to call their lawyer is more than the fine. Smart business decision for all. And our second story. I'm just a bartender and you know everything? Okay, have a nice shower. Happened about 10 years ago. I'd been working in catering and hospitality, managing pubs for about 10 years at that stage. The catering company I worked for had come up short-staffed for a smallish function/festival they were putting on, probably max 200 people at a venue they controlled. I was in a different division, but was asked to help out on the bar and the bump and out. Easy enough, and the music was looking pretty good, so I agreed. It was in the middle of spring, the weather had not yet been really warm, so we were expecting decent numbers, but nothing special. Bringing in the bar was easy enough. The venue was massive and easily able to accommodate the truck, etc. Having a single mobile bar with just one tap tree was probably on the light side, but I figured the venue manager knew what he was doing. So I introduced myself to him and got to work. Unloaded and brought all the gear and beverage in and made a couple of attempts to discuss how we'd set up the service area. Each time was shut down with progressively more aggressive language until he finally told me, "I run dozens of functions in this venue. I think I know how to set it up. We really only asked for a bartender." Okay, no problem, I thought. I didn't mention to him that it had been me that had picked up the truck from the warehouse, collected the bar and 10 kegs from our supplier, as well as the other beverage package, and delivered it to him, or that I was the only one able to bump it all out at the end of the evening, so I just agreed with whatever he said and set up as he wanted. So the weather ended up being a beautiful day, about 27 degrees Celsius, 80 Fahrenheit, with a light breeze, and the turnout was more like 400, much better than expected. Pretty quickly, it turned out that we were struggling to keep up with bar service, so I suggested that rather than a traditional service, we should have one person on the till, one person constantly pouring beers, i.e. never shut off the tap, and one person filling other drinks, wine and soft drinks, etc. Again, I was snapped at by the now clearly stressed venue supervisor. "You just keep serving me and let me do the thinking." Okay, so now I'd had enough. Customers were getting frustrated at the slow service, and this peanut was too proud to accept advice from someone far more experienced. And then the keg blew. I was about to change it when the peanut stepped in and said he'd take care of it. I checked that he knew what he was doing and was assured he'd done it 100 times and to back off and leave him to it. So I did. I watched him not uncouple the gas line and go straight for the beer lock. Happily, he had his face right in the spot, so as soon as he cracked the lock, he copped a huge spray in the face of nice, warm beer foam. All through his hair and all over his glasses, wet all down the front of his shirt as well. It was glorious, and the first 30 people in line thought so as well because they'd witnessed some of his antics. I didn't hear much out of him for the rest of the day. He asked me to change the kegs when needed and pretty much stayed away from the service area. We streamlined things as well, and although it didn't end up a success as far as customer satisfaction, it wasn't the disaster that was brewing. Hopefully, the venue supervisor learned from the experience and will be more open to listening to suggestions in the future. And kudos to you for maintaining your professionalism throughout the ordeal. And our next story. You want to be in control? Fine. Years ago, I worked for a public institution where the supervisor was a total control freak. She was hardly able to delegate the most mundane tasks, and even when she did, she would monitor what her N-degree 2 was doing and give him hell if he dared to call a shot himself. Now, in my field, by law, everybody needs to follow 48 hours of mandatory continued training per 3-year span. The state offers a wide selection of different courses you're free to pick from. If you want or need to get your training from any other agency and/or private company, you need permission from your supervisor. Now, my former supervisor thought that some of these trainings were frivolous, like yoga classes, meant to prevent burnout, or first aid classes, which according to her, you should or could do on your own time. So she decided that all training needed to be green-lighted by herself, which was obviously against the law. Most colleagues decided to ignore that order since it was illegal, and we can't be written up or otherwise disciplined for not following an illegal order. I, on the other hand, thought it would be more fun to comply, so I designed a permission form where I could copy-paste all information from the online curriculum within seconds and check the training offer. I picked quite a number of 2-hour trainings and introduced a form for each one of them. Plus, I sent my form out to all the colleagues, around 175 of them, to make asking for permission easier for them. Quite many picked up on the idea and introduced my form for their trainings as well, so that the control freak supervisor was swamped with hundreds of forms within a single week. We were quite quickly back to being allowed to follow any of the state's trainings freely. Excellent. Throwing the natural consequences of her own bad rules back in her face, and assuming that this was an online form, no trees would have been harmed in the production of this malicious compliance, although a few electrons may have been inconvenienced. And our last story. Neighbor trying to cut down one of my trees without my permission. Normal suburban neighborhood. I have a pine tree in my front yard. It's fully on my side of the property line, but it's fairly close to my neighbor's line, maybe 10 to 15 feet away. We had a new neighbor move in at the beginning of the year, and within a week of moving in, he'd come over to introduce himself and ask about cutting down the tree. He told me he'd pay for all of it, just wanted my permission. I told him I liked the tree, so it probably wouldn't be something we were interested in doing, but I'd think about it. He hits me up on Facebook a couple weeks later, asking if I'd thought about it, and I told him no to cutting it down. Saw him in person one more time, he asked again, and I said no again. So I've given multiple no's directly to him. A few weeks later, around June, my HOA reaches out. They tell me they've received the request to cut down the tree, and they just needed my approval since it's on my property. I told my HOA, no. Nobody had my permission to cut the tree down, and had hoped that was the end of it. Fast forward to last week, my mother-in-law is retired and babysits my infant at my house. Last week, some city workers were stopped in front of my house, so my mother-in-law went out to talk to them. Apparently, my neighbor had called the city and said he had a tree that was dying in his yard and if they could come out and handle it. They showed up, and upon realizing that A, the tree wasn't on his property, and B, it wasn't actually dying, they talked to her to get clarification before doing anything. All this happened while I was at work, so thankfully my mother-in-law told them no. Kinda curious what would have happened if my mother-in-law wasn't home, though. Would the city have waited to speak with me or gone ahead and removed the tree? I've directly told my neighbor no 3 times to cutting down my tree, so now he's gone behind me twice to both our HOA and then the city to bypass me and get it removed on his own. I wrote a letter to my HOA detailing the situation and saying I explicitly do not give my approval to have it removed in case anyone reaches out about it again, but that's all I've done so far. Update. I paid a lawyer to write him a letter explicitly stating what the legal consequences will be if he actually succeeds in getting the tree removed without my permission. Also hired an arborist to assess the value of the tree. Turns out old trees are worth 4 to 5 figures, and the penalty for chopping down a neighbor's tree is 3 times the actual value. Hopefully your neighbor will understand the gravity of the situation and respect your property rights moving forward. If not, it's reassuring to know that you're prepared to take further action to protect your interests. Hey guys, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.